Imagine being perfectly positioned to deal with the pandemic from a K-12 school's standpoint. That's Jeff Utecht. Instead of just being in the K-12 space, he specializes in technology implementation for K-12 schools. But he didn't just fall into that. He spent years building a brand, understanding his audience, and giving away content. How has that helped him? Let's find out. Plus, in Build Something More, we get deep into education during the pandemic. I want you to look for takeaways about creating great content by understanding your niche, that having a podcast is a huge piece of your sales funnel, and how to best leverage social media. You can find all of the show notes for this episode at howibuilt.it/283. And I want to thank this week's sponsors, Nexus and LearnDash. I also want to let you know that for the next couple of episodes and perhaps intermittently throughout through the end of the year, I'm going to be recommending podcasts right here instead of having a pre-roll spot. So right before the intro, right after this open, you're going to hear about a podcast that I recommend and I'm excited to tell you about. So definitely stay tuned for that. So let's get to the podcast recommendation and then the intro and the interview. According to the New York Times, 81% of people want to write a book. I'm one of them, and if you're one of them too, and you want to actually make money as a result of your book, Entrepreneur Publishing Academy, hosted by New York Times best-selling author Anna David, is for you. Every week, she either answers a question about how to build a business with your book or interviews a best-selling author or top entrepreneur. Guests have included everyone from Chris Voss to Adam Carolla, Jay Abraham, and Robert Greene. Named a Best Publishing Podcast by LA Weekly, FeedSpot, and Kindlepreneur, Entrepreneur Publishing Academy is your fun weekly lesson that will show you why a book is the best business card and how to make and maximize yours. You can get a link in the description or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Hey everybody, and welcome to How I Built It, the podcast where you get free coaching calls from successful creators. Each week, you get actionable advice on how you can build a better content business to increase revenue and establish yourself as an authority. I'm your host, Joe Casabona. Now let's get to it. Jeff, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Joe. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for coming on the show. We did a little bit of a podcast swap, though we didn't call it that. And we just both kind of felt like we had genuine the ability to help each other's audiences. So I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way, is just tip number one. If you're into podcasting, anytime you can do that type of thing. Like your episode just came out. Thank you for doing that, talking about podcasting and podcasting resources for educators and students who might want to get involved, seeing that we're focused on education, specifically K-12 education. I think you just had some great insight. So if people want to go listen to that, they can head over to sospodcast.org, or of course you can find Shifting Our Schools anywhere you can find a podcast. So
yes,
that, Joe.
I will link that in the show notes over at howibuilt.it/283. That's the episode number for today. So all of the show notes and everything we talk about will be over there. So so let's dive right into this. I think the first thing I want to ask you here, right, is building a successful brand. You just gave a sentence or so about who your target audience is. If I'm starting out in my business and I want to create content, I've always found that being too general, if you're talking to everybody, you're talking to nobody. Right. How did you figure out who to talk to and who your target audience is?
Yeah, so I'm an educator by trade. I was a fourth grade teacher, and I've been an educational consultant since 2009. So I've already been kind of doing this stuff for a long time. So my audience really was built in to those that I was already communicating with and doing consulting work around. And when we decided to start Shifting Our Schools, it was that point though, right? And especially for, you're talking about narrowing down your audience. If I just say K-12 education, There's literally over 1 million educators just in the United States. Wow. Now we think global at Shifting Schools, right? So we have, Canadian teachers, Australian, New Zealand. I work a lot with international schools in Europe and Asia. So really our audience is a global audience. And I think most people you have to be thinking about that, right? Like it's not always just US centric. Your audience might be US centric, but a lot of times, especially with podcasts, you can get outside of that and be thinking about that. So for us, the first thing was thinking about, okay, we have millions of K-12 teachers, but within that, there's only a small segment that actually listen to podcasts. And within that small segment, what are the ones that we're really after? Now, my focus has always been tech integration. And so we're focused specifically on K-12 teachers who are interested in technology, who are interested in using technology with students in their classroom, or are administrators who might be rolling out a new technology plan at their school, or instructional coaches or technology coaches who are hired by school districts to support. So we've taken this really broad audience and we're really trying to focus and narrow it down to a very specific niche within the K-12. And that's really where we try to focus our efforts. Of course, from there, it always then expands back out, right? Like our idea is if I can get a principal to mention one of our resources at a training or send one of the resources out via email to the rest of their teachers, well, now we have more teachers, right? So our idea is to start with this little niche inside K-12 and have that niche help expand our audience for us. So that's kind of our approach.
I like that a lot, and it makes sense. ConvertKit is a brand that I really admire, and Nathan Barry, the founder, and his team did that as well, right? They are, I don't know if they use this language, but I'll use this language. They are like the email service provider for creators. But they didn't just say we're for all creators, right? They created separate landing pages for musicians, for podcasters, for online course sellers. And then they individually reached out to each of these audiences and did what you just said, right? Reach a couple of them, get them to promote to their audience of musicians or podcasters, and that's how they grew. And I think that's such a great idea or a great plan to execute, because when you talk to, people say the ideal customer avatar or whatever, but Kara Chase is, this is a little episode at a time thing because her episode's coming out after this one, but we recorded before, and she talks about picking like an arbitrary like name and gender and age is like, that's like just total guessing most of the time. But saying my target audience is K-12 teachers interested in tech and who want to improve the tech in their classroom, or now you get to talk directly to those people, right? And so, I say I help any podcaster make money, but like secretly, like all of everything I talk about is kind of focused towards like speakers, authors, and educators, because that's what I am. I know the language that they're using, but then if they're like, hey, this guy helped me, maybe he can help you, even though like you're none of those things. That's kind of the same plan. And it sounds like you figured that out because you were kind of entrenched in the space, right? Fourth grade teacher. So you have K-12, actual K-12 experience. And then you served as an educational consultant. So you understand the questions that those types of people are asking, right?
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of our content comes from. A lot of our content comes from, I'm still consulting today. I keynote conferences, I go and do workshops and professional development days. And a lot of our stuff comes from, I'll go and spend, for example, I just spent 2 days with pre-service teachers at a university. I teach a university course for those that want to become teachers. And I've got 6 episodes because here are teachers, they're going to be teachers, right? They're graduating, I think, in December, and they'll be teachers in December. And they have these great questions. And so I'm jotting down these questions that are all going to become episodes where I can go out and I can find an educator, or I find a Joe, or I find somebody that I'm like, hey, I've got this great question that educators, like this is on the mind of educators. Can you come on my show and help me answer this question? So I'm always looking for questions. And I think that is another great tip. Like if you're going to be a podcaster, whatever realm you're in, or you want to start a business, what are the questions that people are asking? and how can you help answer those questions? And I mean, I've got the journal's not here. It's still in my backpack because I just got home. But I actually have a journal I carry around, and I'm constantly writing down like, oh, that's a great question. And then you start to see topics start to come up, right? Like all of a sudden things start bubble up. You're like, man, these 4 questions are pretty much the same question. If that happens, you've got a pretty good episode, or you can make a free resource to help answer that question, which is what we do a lot of times. And that's how you start to get traction, right? So it starts with, and this is my wife's a school counselor, and the thing she tells me every day is don't forget to listen, right? It's such an important tool.
Don't forget to listen. I like that a lot. And it's easy to kind of like get random emails from people. And especially, I come from the developer world, and people get a lot of new developers will send questions. It's like, can you look at this code and help me rewrite it? And those kind of things, I think, almost train like freelance developers or other people in that same situation to not want to answer those questions, right? Because now you're asking me to do what I charge like $150 an hour to do.
Right.
But moving into the educational space or the general business space, like you want to know what questions people have, what problems they're trying to solve, because your product, your service should be a solution to a problem. And I think this was one of the hardest lessons I learned, because again, as a developer, I was always like, oh yeah, this uses the latest technology. This is the best LMS plugin for WordPress.
Right, yeah.
People who want to sell online courses, like they just want to sell them, right? They don't really care that this is the best plugin for WordPress. They want to know, can I build the course I want to build with this tool? Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's, we try to listen as much as possible, and we try to create those resources. If there's one fault that we have at Shifting Schools, we give away too much free stuff. And we've been told this over and over again. If you go over to shiftingschools.com under our resource library, and if you're an educator, you'll get it. If you're not, it just looks like a bunch of random stuff. But we have like over 60 free PDF guides. And these we call them plug and play. Like they're actual lesson plans that teachers can download. And over 60% of those have come from either emails or a tweet that teachers have. There's a ton of teachers on Twitter. That's where bunch of educators hang out. And we'll get these questions like, hey, I'm looking for a resource on X, Y, and Z. And if we don't have it, we make it, we upload it, and we give it away for free. Now, when I say give it away for free, of course, you have to give us your email, right, to download the free PDF. And now we've got you on our newsletter list, which is really what the free stuff is about. But we're constantly giving away free stuff. Like we make, I don't know, we must make a new free guide to something every other week.
Wow.
Yeah.
So actually, let's dig into that really quick. And then I want to circle back to, if you're, I think a lot of creators worry about giving away too much for free, especially if you're in like the knowledge exchange space, right? Like if I tell you everything I know, like why would you pay me for anything? And I have thoughts around that. But let's talk about the creating a free guide every other week. First of all, I'll just do you have a team of people?
Yeah, I have one other person at the moment. My team fluctuates based on where we are. It's summertime right now, and teachers are on holiday, so everything, like our podcast numbers sync. Everything syncs in the summertime, especially in the month of July when we're recording this. And so I do have one person. I have a creative content person. She's also an educator, so she speaks the language. She understands what is going on, and she's the one that's pumping out the guides. She's getting the podcast guests. She's running all of our social media and kind of just keeping things going. And then we meet once a week and say, what are the questions that we're hearing coming up, and where do we want to drive the conversation for next month?
Gotcha. So I guess the real question I was asking was like, do you have like 10 people so that you have one person working on a guide per month or whatever, but you have one person. What's her process like? Is you said she's an educator, so she probably understands what you're doing pretty well, like you said, and maybe she doesn't have to do a ton of research, but maybe she does, right? And so like maybe how does she find the information to put together the guide? Where does she write the guide? what is she using, like Canva or like Quark Express?
we're big Canva users. And I think that's the other thing with your free guides is we went into Canva and we spent a lot of time with another friend and colleague of mine who's kind of part-time but mostly does it for free. She's out of New Zealand, but she's really into design. So she designs our website and she designs like our color schemes and our logos. And so one of the first things we did is we went into Canva and we bought a pro account in Canva and set up, like, once you do that, you can create your branding kit. And the branding kit, then, you can put in your logos and your brand colors. And again, this all comes down to recognition of your brand. And so all of these free guides look exactly like, when you're getting a Shifting Schools guide. And so we rely heavily on Canva. Everything is put into Canva. And so everything is coming out. It looks the same. It looks professional. My content creator, she loves Canva. And then her process is usually, she's just amazing to start with. She's just an incredible, creative person. But she'll go out and research. She can find some different links, usually videos or articles to pull together to put for links inside of a PDF. She's an educator, so she knows how to create really good lesson plans. So she has the content knowledge. And I think that's really important. Could I go out and hire a VA, a virtual assistant, to do this stuff? Yes. Do they know education? No. And when I'm in a knowledge place, like education is a knowledge economy, right?
Yep.
These teachers are looking for knowledge. It's a knowledge economy. I need somebody that understands that, right? I need somebody to understand that. If I need plumbing done, I don't go and hire a lawn maintenance person, right? I need a plumber. And we have to remember that. I love VAs. I've used VAs when things get out of control. I will hire a VA to do stuff. But there are specific parts of your organization. There are specific parts of your company. You need a knowledgeable, like somebody who knows depth of that knowledge. You use the idea of a web developer, right? You have to know code. Like, you're getting emails because they know you know code, right? You can't just go ask somebody, hey, look at this code. There's knowledge that's needed there. And so there are some things like, have a VA. There's a lot of great stuff you can do. But when it comes to building content, you need somebody with that understanding. So you make sure you're talking your audience's language. It's so key.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, like, I have a VA. She's great. She's going to use my Canva template to make the imaging for this because that's a very clear process, step by step. But when one of the mistakes I made early on, right, I set her up for failure here because I thought I could just tell her to do something and it would get done. But that's the type of VA she is not that. So I said, just find a bunch of conferences for me to speak at. Like, I want to speak at, I talk about podcasting and WordPress or whatever. Yeah. And like most of the conferences she found were like, she found conferences, but they weren't good fits. Or they already happened. And I was like, that was unclear direction. And that's very subjective, right? Just like I'm not going to ask her to find the pull quote for this conversation. That's something that I've got to do because I'm having the conversation. I know what's the most impactful. Once I find it, she can make the audiogram or whatever, or like the extra content. So I think that's really important. I'll have a link to the show notes to Canva. I'm a big fan of Canva too. Again, with the caveat that knowing that like I have another conversation coming up where we're like the tool matters less than the actual doing it. If you're comfortable in Photoshop or whatever, like I'm not saying go learn Canva. I'm just saying I suck at Photoshop and Canva made it really easy for me. So that's awesome. Now, to circle back, you said you give too much away for free. I did look at those guides. There are a ton there. And it's not just like, like top 5 learning management systems. Like the first one I saw was a podcast for Pride Month, right? Like that's like, I would have never guessed, like you said, I'm not in the K-12 space. I would have never guessed. I also went to like, not to get dicey or anything, but I went to Catholic school. So we probably wouldn't have had that topic in school anyway.
Yeah.
So like, you're right. Like that's super niche content.
Yeah.
and it's behind not a paywall. You got to give your email address, right? So
right.
What does your funnel look like? You have this great content, people get onto your mailing list.
Yeah, so our funnel comes, our two main funnels, like just looking at our statistics, it comes from our podcast. So in our podcast, every time we launch a free PDF, every time we launch a free guide, there is a podcast episode talking about that guide. So, for example, that one, right? So June is Pride Month. School is usually ending here in the United States in June. So we wanted something that was simple, something that teachers could use. Here's a bunch of podcasts that are geared towards middle school, high school, or we believe that middle school, high school kids could comprehend and have some conversations around. So the guide is, here are links to some podcasts, and here are some questions as a teacher that you might want to have follow-up conversations with your kids. That's really what the guide is, right? Like we've done all the searching for you. We found the podcast, we've come up with the questions. You just need to deliver it in your classroom. So we do the podcast episode saying, hey, we've got this new free guide. Here's what it looks like. Here are some of the questions that you're going to have conversations around in your classroom. If this interests you, head over to shiftingschools.com and download the free resource today. We get a lot of traction going from our podcast to our free guides, AKA our mailing list, right? The other thing is knowing where your audience is on social media. There's all kinds of social media out there, but you need to know where your audience is. Like I have two different companies actually, right? I have my K-12 company, which we're talking about now. Teachers are on Twitter. To our best of knowledge, because I've been on Twitter, like I'm Twitter number like 132,000. Like I've been on Twitter like from the beginning, like before there were smartphones, Twitter, right? So we know,
could send a text message, right, to tweet.
Yes, I did. I had text messages on my little flip phone in China, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is to know is that is where the majority, for some reason, that is where teachers hang out. My K-12 teachers hang out on Twitter. To the best of our knowledge, there's over 1 million teachers on Twitter. So we don't spend a lot of time on TikTok. We're starting to talk about TikTok because teachers are starting to move that way, but we don't have a lot of teachers on Instagram. Teachers use Instagram for personal stuff, not professional stuff. So we need to hit teachers where they're at. So we get a lot of traction by saying, hey, new free guide on Twitter, right? And we put it out through the Shifting Schools Twitter account. We put it out through my personal Twitter account. And because I've been on Twitter for a long time, I've got a pretty good educational following. I think 20,000 followers, which in education is a pretty good number.
Yeah.
And so we get a lot of traction from that. Now, if I just spend that time in Instagram, I wouldn't see that traction because that's not where they're at. Now, my other business is real estate, right? My wife and I have a real estate investing business. I also have a podcast that I just started around real estate in the state of Washington. You talk about niche, just the state of Washington. But what do I know about real estate? They don't hang out on Twitter. They hang out on Instagram because everybody loves to show pictures of, here's the house I flipped. Here's the house I bought. Here's the house I sold. So I spend no time on Twitter when it comes to real estate because that's not where my audience is. All of our time and focus is on Instagram. And the message here is there's 1 million different social networks. Don't try to do them all, especially when you're starting. Yeah, as you grow and you grow a team, you can do them all. But when you're starting, know which one your audience is mostly using. And really hone in on that one, whatever that one happens to be. But you got to do a little research and you got to know where people are. Otherwise, you're wasting your time making TikTok videos for people over 65. It's just not going to work, right? I mean, it's cool and it's fun and you're hip because you're 28 and you're starting a business, but that's not where your audience is. So you got to do some research and understand where those are. So those are our two main funnels. Our podcast and our social media are aimed towards our free content, AKA our mailing list. And from our mailing list, we go out to our online courses and consulting.
This episode is brought to you by LearnDash. Look, I've been making courses for a long time. I've taught at the college level, and I've created curriculums for several different organizations, including Udemy, Sessions College, and LinkedIn Learning. When I create my own courses, there's no better option than LearnDash. LearnDash combines cutting-edge e-learning tools with WordPress. They're trusted to power learning programs for major universities, small to mid-sized companies, startups, and creators worldwide. What makes LearnDash so great is it was created by and is run by people who deeply understand online learning and adds features that are truly helpful for independent course creators. I love the user experience. And now you can import Vimeo and YouTube playlists and have a course created automatically in seconds. I trust LearnDash to run my courses and membership, and you should too. Learn more at howibuilt.it/LearnDash. A lot of people, especially in the creator space, are like, you got to get on TikTok. Everybody's on TikTok. You got to get on TikTok. And me, I'm like, I'm not the most data privacy centric person, but I'm also like, I don't know about TikTok. I've been really hesitant.
Me too. Me too. Same reason.
And, I don't know that my audience is there. So like you said, this is a lesson I learned when I was at the University of Scranton, working at the University of Scranton. I said, I felt like all major universities are like really slow to move on anything.
Yeah.
And Snapchat was just getting big or whatever. And so I said, we're trying to get new students or whatever. How come we're not on Snapchat? And the VP of public relations said, we're not on Snapchat yet because we're not convinced it's going to help us, because it might feel more like your dad coming to the house party, right?
Oh,
and
true.
we don't want that. We don't want that associated with the University of Scranton brand. And I'm like, damn, that was a good answer. I thought I was nailing him to the wall. 27 no and everything, of course. So I thought that was a really good answer, and it makes sense. I did look at when you joined Twitter. You the month before me. I thought I've been on there for a long time. I joined on April Fool's Day, 2007. It's still the greatest April Fool's joke ever played on me, is joining Twitter. That said, I'm like super active on. If I had to guess, I think most podcasters are active on Twitter, especially in Twitter Spaces. Like I should do that more. But like I thought, like, should I Instagram? Should I TikTok? And I'm not convinced that I should yet. So I think that's really great. So once people are on your mailing list, right, you do have paid products, I assume, right?
Yeah, we have online courses that we run, and we've got both. Well, we were running a lot of synchronous, like live Zoom session type of things, but really what we're moving to now is a bunch of asynchronous stuff. So basically, we've recorded the videos ahead of time. Online courses, you record the video ahead of time, and people can either download them or go to our website and view them there on the website. And really what we're pushing towards is trying to get back, because the pandemic in K-12 really, and that's a whole other topic, but just turned the thing upside down, and trying to get back into the consulting space. Because before the pandemic, I was traveling 200,000 miles a year supporting teachers and doing all that. And we're just not back to a place where they're bringing in consultants yet. So it's trying to figure out, like, how do we get, it will come back, but how in this meantime, how do we navigate and still support teachers and still be relevant in a space? Absolutely. So those are the two things. Yeah. Our online courses and then consulting work that we do.
Gotcha. And I'm thinking, and build something more, maybe we can talk about the pandemic and how it impacted K-12 and how it impacted your business, especially because you're at the intersection of K through 12 and technology. Does that sound good?
I've got some good stories for you. That'll be good.
Awesome. Well, if you want to hear those stories, you can join the creator crew over at howibuilt.it/283. There'll be a sign up link there. And it's $50 a year. That's less than $5 a month. Like I pay $5 to $6 for an iced coffee when I go to a coffee shop. So lots of free content, ad-free extended episodes, live stream replays, and lots of behind the scenes stuff. Again, that's howibuilt.it/283. So something I'm really curious about, because I tried one of the first businesses I started that failed because I didn't understand anything, was a website building platform built on top of WordPress for high schools. I built it on top of WordPress. So like my first problem was the GPL. Like I couldn't have a license for the code. I can only have a license for support. But the other major problem was that it was 2008, 2009 when I launched this business. And so like no one had money because there was a recession. But I felt like selling a value proposition especially in like grammar schools, high schools, and again, I'm most familiar with Catholic schools who have even less money.
Right.
How do you position your paid products, right? Because do you get the schools to pay for them? I know like a lot of teachers have to pay for like their classroom supplies out of pocket and stuff like that. So what is that? How do you account for that?
Yeah, and I think this is really good for, again, we failed more times than we've succeeded.
Mm-hmm.
One of our mottos at Shifting Schools and just me in life is fail fast, fail loud. I actually stole that from an employee at Amazon here in Seattle. It's the way he runs his company. Fail fast, fail loud. And that's what we do a lot at Shifting Schools is we try stuff all the time. And when it fails, we celebrate it. We're like, oh my gosh, we just spent $1,000 building a course that nobody's bought. Yay! And then we try to figure out why, right? Yeah. And then it's like, what happened? And so that is a lot of what we're trying to do is we're trying to position ourselves now into moving from teachers paying for individual courses because teachers don't have a lot of money. And they're asked to buy for a lot of stuff themselves. And what we were finding was in order to sell any of our products, we're down to like $15 for an online course. Well, at $15, I need to sell like 1,000 of them to even break even. You know what I mean? Like it's not, it became like you're driving to the bottom dollar. And if you're racing to the bottom, you're not going to win.
Yeah.
So we are starting to change our strategy where we're putting together groups of online courses that a district can buy. And this is through trial and error because we tried to sell directly to teachers and it just wasn't going anywhere. And so we are trying to get to that district level because districts have funds that come from all over places, grants, and the state has different funds that they can only use on specific things. And right now, after the pandemic, we know that every state, thank you to the federal government, has specific funds on professional development, specifically on technology. So we know there's this bunch of funds that has to be used that way.
Yeah.
So our goal is like, can we package 4 or 5 online courses that we can then deliver to a school district, a district buys for all of their teachers. And then you buy a site license or it's, $4,000 for all your teachers or whatever the price is. So that is where we're headed. But it's been a lot of trial and error. And the other thing is to know is just like, again, we know educators, they want free stuff. If you've ever been to an educational conference, it's like one of the worst places because if you're going to set up a booth at an educational conference, you better be giving away free pens, free squishy balls, because educators will take everything free that you give them.
Yep.
And that is also why when people come to our website, they're like, you give away a lot of stuff for free. But that in my community, that's how you build trust. People are willing to give over their money. If they've gotten 60 things for free, I'll give you $5 for that one.
Yeah.
Because it's a way almost like, this sounds bad, but you can almost guilt your audience into it. And we've probably all done this, right? Like I use, is it CyberDuck? Is that the FTP?
Yeah.
Right? So I've used that for years. And at the end of it, every time it's like donate. Well, 5 years later, I'm like, you know what? I could donate.
Yeah.
Like they guilted me into it. I use their product. It works great for me. It does exactly what I need it to do. Here's $5. Here's $10,
Yeah.
And so we use that same kind of model. We give a ton of stuff away for free because what it's doing is it's building trust with my audience. So then when I'm saying, hey, this resource is going to cost you $15, they'll hand over that $15. And I can get $5, $10, $15 out of a teacher. By the time I hit $20, most teachers are like, that's too expensive for me.
Wow.
Right? And so we have to move to that other side of trying to get districts to pay for this. But the goal then is like, if I can get you're a teacher in a school and I've got you bought in, right? And you're a super fan of us and you've got all these free resources. And all of a sudden I say, hey, Joe, I've got this set of 5 online courses that your district can buy for all of your teachers that aligns with everything you've seen. And you send it to your principal and your principal cuts the check. Your principal looks like a hero because all their teachers has got these cool resources. You feel good and I get paid, right?
Yeah.
So it's building that trust with your audience. And in education, it's all through free stuff. We give away free books on the podcast. We give away, it's free. Like it's the only way to get to the hearts and minds of an educator these days.
Yeah. And I mean, to be fair, right? It's tough. educators are, especially K-12 educators, are not paid enough. And they do have to pay for stuff out of pocket, right? So
Yeah.
that's like, I get down on like the WordPress community is where most of my stuff was targeted for a long time. And
Yeah.
they feel the same way, except like you're building like a technology business, like you're building a business. You should be willing to invest like $1,000 in a cohort-based course to help you make more money. Yeah. The value proposition is different in your field, right? Because you can't necessarily say, hey, if you pay $500 for my course, you're going to get a salary increase of more than that. You can't say that.
Exactly. You can't say that. So. And this is the thing. I think targeting a K-12 audience is one of the hardest audiences to target, which is why there's so many ed tech companies that go belly up. Yeah. I mean, there are so many ed tech startups, technology startups that are trying to get into the K-12 space. It's a really tough sell. It really is hard to get in. There isn't a lot of money there. I mean, there's billions of dollars, but you're talking billions of dollars spread over 10 million kids. Like it's not a lot of money when you start actually working numbers. So
which is why it's even more important to understand your audience, right? Because you were a K-12 teacher. And so you know where to go how to find the money, essentially.
Yeah.
This buying psychology. And just one more point on this, right? Your free content is good content, which I think probably tells people they give away so much for free. If they're charging for this, it must be really good. Like, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's at least as good as the free stuff.
Right.
And it's probably better.
Yeah.
Because the paid stuff actually has videos of Jeff, just not Jeff's audio on a podcast. Like you get to see Jeff and you get to hear Jeff's excitement and you get to hear this principal and that teacher who's used the resource. And, you get all these extra bonus things. And
yeah, absolutely. So my last question here as we're coming up on time, right, is it looks like you've got these self-paced courses, team-paced learning pathways, and then it looks like you also might offer coaching. It really feels like lately self-paced courses are falling out of favor, maybe. And what people are looking for are cohort-based courses or group coaching programs. Are you seeing the same thing in the K-12 space?
Yeah, people want to connect. I mean, it's human nature. People want to connect. I think we saw the asynchronous kind of self-paced thing come and go. Not saying that it's not valuable. Not saying that there aren't people who are intrinsically motivated that will still do those. But what we are seeing is we're seeing the cohort model. I think mastermind is the new big word for basically a cohort model. Like we'll put together a mastermind group, which is basically a cohort of learners.
Right.
I mean, we changed the name and make it sound cool, and it's the same thing we've been doing for a long time. But we're seeing that. We're seeing that those are things we want. We do a lot of stuff around the Google platform, Google Workspace. I am a Google certified partner, nice. So that gives me some access to that. So you're going to be seeing what one of the things we're doing this summer is with some things that are happening at Google is we're putting together this group of courses that are all around using the Google Workspace in schools, which is great for us. I mean, part of the reason to become a Google certified partner on my end is I think we're running right around, I want to say around 80% of all schools in the US use Google.
Wow. So
they've got a huge hold inside of K-12. And so knowing I'm a Google certified partner, I can, we're making these group of courses that are going to be both what you're talking about. We are going to run a cohort where if you want to come and you want to meet with other educators around the US and around the world and go through this work together, fantastic. You get to expand your network, meet other educators, make connections, wonderful. But if you are a school district that maybe just went Google or your teachers could use a little upping on their Google skills, the district can buy this set of courses. You can then pay your teachers inside your district, which a lot of districts will. They'll pay teachers, whether it's not usually a salary bump, but every time you finish a course, you'll get $50 or $75, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to use the same set to do both things with. So we'll see. Fail fast, fail loud. We'll see if it works. But that's kind of our strategy this summer.
This episode is brought to you by Store Builder from Nexus. When it comes to setting up an e-commerce site, you have a choice between easy but limited or a limitless platform that you need to manage yourself. Until now. Store Builder is e-commerce made easy for everybody. It saves you time and delivers a storefront that lets you get to selling. As someone who set up multiple e-commerce sites, I can tell you that Store Builder has been a much easier experience than anything else. Answer a few questions, add your content, and sell. Store Builder was created and is supported by e-commerce experts at Nexus. Get the speed, security, and support you need when you need it. Are you ready to launch your perfect online store? Head over to howibuilt.it/storebuilder for a special offer. That's howibuilt.it/storebuilder. We're in this transitional period, right? The way I've been looking at it, kind of, is from my friend Chris Badgett, who runs Lifter LMS. Which I guess I should say, like, full disclosure here, their competitor is a current sponsor of this episode, but whatever. Chris has coined this term for me, at least, which is just-in-time learning, right? And with like a self-paced course, that's what you get, right? You're banging around in Google and you're like, oh man, how do I like set up that classroom site again?
Exactly.
Let me go to this course and like watch that. Where the cohort-based course includes a little bit more accountability, live training. You can ask those questions in a way that even with like the better community management tools we've been seeing lately, people, when they have a question about a thing they're learning, they probably want it answered then, right? Like they're in that context. And so if one of my students like takes a programming course and then they ask a question and I don't get back to them for 12 hours, like they've either already figured it out on their own, and so like my input is kind of useless, or they've like left that context and maybe they're discouraged. So I think I like the cohort model. I'm trying it out myself. I'll also, maybe I'll bait you into answering this question too a little bit, right? Which is something I heard so much that always kind of cut against my core belief is, oh yeah, an online course is passive income. Like you just set it up and you walk away and it makes money.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
maybe
especially
both. Yeah.
Yeah, well, especially in the technology world, like there might be other places that I could do that, but
maybe math,
I'll use Google.
Changed.
I will use Google as an example, right?
Yeah.
Again, I'm a Google certified partner, and I love Google and I freaking hate Google because as soon as I create a video saying, "Hey, here's how to set up this in the calendars," they switch the button. They switch the color of the button, and you have to make the video again. Like it's constantly trying to update that stuff, right? And so that is where it's not as passive as it seems. And I just use that, but and anybody listening to this that's in the technology field, man, if you're trying to do online courses, it's not passive. Like you're trying to keep up with every little change that is going on, it's really, really rough. The other thing I think we're at, and you talked about this, like we're in this really interesting place after the pandemic. And I don't think this is just an education thing. I think we're in this really interesting place where we are sick and tired of being on Zoom. Whether you were working from home or, in my case, educators are sick and tired of being online. Like they were in online for hours during the pandemic trying to get kids to do stuff. So we're in this really interesting place that even if I try to set up a cohort online, nobody wants to spend more time on Zoom. But we're not feeling safe enough yet to go to an in-person workshop. So I'm really struggling, and I'll be completely honest, we're really struggling with this idea of, okay, we can't get people to come on time because people don't want to spend another hour on Zoom. They really don't. They are tired of technology. They're tired of being on Zoom. They just want to be back with their kids. They just want to be back in person. So then we try to offer a weekend workshop. Nobody shows up.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so we're caught right now between this. We're not quite out of the pandemic to where people feel safe being around strangers, a lot of strangers in a close proximity, at least here in the Pacific Northwest. And we're sick and tired of being online. And so we're kind of in this, and one of the things I love about these kind of moments is this is when innovation happens. How do you innovate around these challenges? And you just look at outside of education, where are we as society? I was just reading an article the other day that I think it's Allstate Insurance only has 1% of their workforce that is coming every day back to their office. 1%.
Wow.
So they're struggling, like only 1% is coming every day. I think it was like 30, it was a New York Times article. I can send it to you if you want it for the show notes. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Like 37% are coming in once in a while. And then the rest of them are all working remotely. So even corporations and companies are still trying to figure out how in the world do you run a business when you have people, and we're all in this, right? It's such a messy time, which is messy and frustrating. But if you're an innovator, man, there's something that's going to come out of this. And I don't know what it is yet, but there's something that's going to come out of this, that we're going to see some things move. And I think that to me as an entrepreneur, and same thing, like I've started and crashed more businesses than I can count at this point. Yeah. But I love that. I love trying to figure out what is that thing, what's the magic key?
Solving that problem. And I mean, you're right. Look at Apple, right? Apple's the most lucrative company. I think I read something like if they were a country, they'd be like in the top 10 for like GDP.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
But they're the most lucrative company in the world. And they have tried half a dozen times to come back and then stopped. And then they finally just said, we're not going to, anybody who doesn't need to be in person doesn't need to be in person for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
And not even they figured it out.
Yeah. And here in Seattle, I mean, there's all kinds of articles coming out here because I'm based in Seattle. We're very tech heavy. We're like number 2 to San Francisco now.
Yeah.
And we're still struggling with commercial real estate. Like people just aren't coming back like they thought they would commercially. Residential, people are moving back into the city in droves. But commercial, they're still at like 53% or something. And we've got Google, Facebook, Amazon, of course.
Yep.
And they're just like, Microsoft. And it's just like everybody's still trying to figure it out. And so I think as an entrepreneur, if you don't have the answers yet, that's okay. Yeah. I don't think the world has the answers of what the future looks like yet. We're still trying to figure it out. Keep your nose to the grindstone and keep trying things. Fail fast, fail loud, and celebrate your failures because that's how you learn and the next thing might be a hit.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to say this on the show, knowing that it's not going to come out for several weeks. So Jeff is the only one who's hearing it. But it just occurred to me that I'm in the podcast space. Maybe audio only, live audio is the way to do it, right? You get that online learning, but I can be outside sort of thing. I mean, this is it's not even half baked. It's like a quarter baked idea, but private podcasting feels like a good place to kind of fill this need. Because people are sick of being in front of their computers, and I'm a computer person, so I'm always in front of it. And that didn't occur to me, but when you're in the classroom, you're in the class, you prefer being.
Well, and this is one of the things we're playing with is we call it podcast PD.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, love it. Yeah.
If we can do a bunch of podcast episodes, because one of the things we're constantly talking about, one of the things we talk about as a company is if you get on the phone, you win.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Yeah. You get on the phone, you win. And podcasts are the easiest thing to have on a phone. And to your point, if I can give you some professional development, if I can give you a course where you're standing in the grocery line, watching the kid at soccer practice, and I can have one earbud in and I could be learning something anywhere, anytime, that to me, I think has something. We're playing with it. We haven't figured out the secret sauce yet, but I do think that there's something there, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It'd be interesting to see.
Yeah, I'm getting ideas. I love it. Well, Jeff, this has been such a great conversation. You've given us so much already, but I do need to ask my favorite question, which is, do you have any trade secrets for us?
Any trade secrets for you? I think the only trade secret I have is when it comes to social media, know that it's all about the hashtag. And I don't know if that's a trade secret or not, but specifically in education, when we're doing things, and we can use that free guide that you were talking about, the podcasting for LGBTQ+ for Pride Month. Know your hashtags. It's one thing to send out a tweet or to send out an Instagram post on your account. It's another thing to know exactly where that audience is and what they follow. So for us on Twitter, it was hashtag Pride Month. And just by doing a tweet and adding hashtag Pride Month, you're in a different community. Those people don't follow us. Those people don't even know we existed. And here's a resource for you if you want it, right? So one of our trade secrets is know your hashtags. Spend time researching what hashtags are people using, what communities have, what hashtags have really large communities. And then figure out, okay, be very specific. You don't want to hashtag everything, but 2 or 3 really good hashtags, can really propel your content out there into new audiences that might not know you exist. And I don't know if that's a trade secret, but it's something we use all the time.
I mean, it's great. I personally don't think, except on Instagram, right? I think, oh yeah, blah, 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 like this hashtag, whatever. But I don't use enough hashtags on Twitter, for example. And that's where most of my useful social media content lives. So quick follow-up question. Do you use something to do hashtag research?
What do you mean as far as like for us to do research on
like
stuff?
a tool, like, there's like Ahrefs or whatever, like full disclosure, former sponsor, for like keyword research. Is there like a tool for like hashtag research? Actually,
I don't know.
I'm able to answer this question as I'm asking it.
I don't know if there is one.
Yeah.
Is there one?
So I use Tweet Hunter. I'm a big fan of Tweet Hunter. And they have like analytics and recommendations. I'm certain that there's like some sort of hashtag thing.
Probably.
So yeah, super interesting though. I'm sure they exist, but that's really so. How do you figure out which hashtags to use? I guess maybe that's the real question.
Yeah, and I mean that one for me is easy. I'm in the educational space. I've been in this educational space for a long time. So we just like if I'm, if I you just know what they are. I mean, for me in education, if we have a resource that is aimed at elementary teachers, it's hashtag elementary chat. Everything's chat in education. So it's ELEM chat. And that is where all elementary teachers hang out. But then there's kinder chat, first grade chat, second grade chat, and they're all hashtags. So if we have a resource that's specifically for kindergarten, first and second grade, we put those 3 hashtags in and only those teachers. So we are targeting specifically. If it's an ELA resource, boom. If it's a social studies resource, boom. Right? Hashtag SS chat, which is social studies, education chat. Like we just know what those are. And we go at them. The other thing to know is, I mean, I don't know how kosher this is, but every conference has a hashtag. Yeah. And so a lot of times, there's a big ed tech conference called ISTE that has like usually about 20,000 educators go to the conference, and the hashtag blows up during the conference. During the conference, we use that hashtag. Hey, here's a new free PDF, hashtag ISTE22, and everybody that's following that conference, whether they know us or not, is going to see that tweet because they're following that hashtag to get the most out of that conference. So if you have conferences that are specific to your audience, you can also use those when the conference is happening, of course. Like once the conference is done, that hashtag just kind of flies away.
Right, goes away.
So it's a good way to just get new audience members.
And you're tweeting usefully, right? It's not like you're just like spamming it. Like, hey, fill out and listen to my podcast, right? It's hey, you're educators. Stuff. Yeah, and it's free stuff. Yeah, which people are already primed to get at conferences, as you mentioned.
Yeah,
before.
Exactly.
Love it. Jeff, this has been such a great conversation. If people want to learn more about you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so to learn more about me, you can go to my personal website is jeffutecht.com. I'm at Jutecht, that's Jutecht, everywhere on the socials. And then the company website is shiftingschools.com. So that's it. That's where you can get us.
I will link to all of that in the show notes over at howibuilt.it/283. You'll also be able to join the creator crew over there. And it's going to be a good post-interview conversation about how the pandemic affected K through 12 and technology. Feels like Jeff's a good person to talk about this with. So ad-free extended episodes and more. howibuilt.it/283. Jeff, thanks so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Joe. I appreciate it.
And thanks so much for listening. I am always thankful that thousands of you tune in to all of these episodes. I love it. Thanks to our sponsors. Definitely check them out. And until next time, get out there and build something.